Testing.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. It is Tuesday, February 28th. Welcome to the school board meeting, and we will call the meeting to order with the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Dr. Finch, I believe we have one change to the agenda this evening.
Well, we're going to add a travel request, so it's good news. We have a travel request by Mary Rose Tahat. That will be number 8 travel request, and that is for the Knowledgeable State Competition. So our knowledgeable team from the high school has made it to the state competition. They'll be traveling to Wenatchee, and it's a competition on 2 days, so it's an overnight trip, March 10th and 11th to 2023. In addition, we need to add agenda item. We'll make that number 15. It'll be an executive session for performance of a public school employee. And then number 16 will be adjournment.
Okay, thank you. Item 5, communications.
Under communications, there was no need for response to public comment. We have that there as a placeholder. Item B was a letter that we received from the Department of Ecology. This is regarding the remediation of the soil at the Apple Valley site. And so this is a good news from the Department of Ecology that all remediation has been completed and their inspection has determined there's no additional action necessary. So just good news that that project is complete.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Finch. Item 6 is public comment on non-discussion agenda items. At this time, I'd like to open it up for public comment. Ms. Smith is walking over to give me the list.
And just a reminder, the discussion item is the remaining bond fund. So if a person wanted to comment on that, you would wait till number 9, which is the public comment of discussion item. So that's regarding the remaining bond funds. If you'd like to comment on any other item, this would be the time now to comment. And we do have the sign-in list here.
Okay. Thank you. We have 3 people that have requested to speak. First is Carl Blevins. Did I say that right? Carol. I beg your pardon. I was like, man, I know I'm gonna mess this up. My apologies.
It's when I went through my whole life like that.
Yeah.
Sister Cheryl Carroll. Well, tonight I just kind of had a question. I've been approved as a visitor and had my background check and everything. So I was wondering, can I come in and talk to the principals first and see and go through and look at the books that are in libraries at the school? And that was just my question get a response maybe next time for that.
Okay, thank you. Bradley Liebrecht. Okay, Peter Marinacci.
Good evening. As I see that the possibility of accepting the conflicts of interest policy is on the agenda today, I wanted to suggest that this be put off to allow the study session that Dr. Finch said was forthcoming, which may lead to additional suggestions or ideas that may further modify proposed changes. Since I spoke to this group on this topic a couple meetings ago, just to help me get some perspective, I contacted a member of WVSD, and on the specific scenario of a board member voting on the general budget when a spouse serves on a collective bargaining team, he shared that while nothing precludes this, however, agreed the appearance of this can raise concerns. Again, there is potential that members of the community would view any dialogue or vote on a future budget by this party as potentially impacting the outcome, which could be a negotiating point in future collective bargaining agreements. During that prior board meeting and afterwards, there was a discussion I had with a few of you, and there was a number of examples that were shared, and we can go through all those examples, but time doesn't really allow me right now. And that's why, again, I think a study session would be good to talk through some of those scenarios. Some of the ones that were brought up, I actually don't think are a conflict, but again, time doesn't allow to discuss them. One of the things I talked about last time was the policy as presented tonight is cross-referenced with policy 6230, relationship with vendors. And in it, again, there's that statement that says the district will make purchasing decisions based upon objectivity and will not be influenced by friendships or other personal relationships. And again, this is a very good statement. It's awesome. However, it's not complete. It does not specifically call out board members, administrators, or staff to state if they have such a relationship, if potential business comes before the district. And I checked with Dr. Finch about this because I know there's a question that Mr. Thorney, you raised, said, hey, don't we have that somewhere? And he indicated not. So as abundance of caution, I would suggest that policy 6230 be modified with specific instructions that should any business come before the district whereby such a relationship exists, the board member, administrator, staff person must state as such and recuse as appropriate. And with respect to the proposed policy tonight, 1610, for consideration, could not an added provision be made also to make this clear as well? After all, proposed clause E already denotes when there is a remote interest in a contract. Why not add to this point for existing personal relationships? With all these matters, while there is the law, and certainly you guys have school counsel note what is minimally required, I would again posit that we should look for the most transparent and highest level of standard possible. The WVSD rep indicated that they can offer a specialized conflicts course for any school board. And further, I see no pressing reason why this needs to be rushed and not wait for further discussion via the study session. Thank you.
I have no one else signed up for requesting to speak to the board, but I will open it up to anybody else that would like to address the board on non-agenda discussion items. I will close the public comment period. Thank you. Next up is item 7, approval of the consent agenda. As is our usual custom and practice, before the board are approval of minutes, approval of vouchers and payrolls, financial reports, approval of employment contracts, approval of resignations, retirements, and separations, approval of leave requests, and everything has been presented in the board packet. If there are any questions, now's the time to come forward. Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion.
All right. I'll move that we, excuse me, approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. Call for a vote. All those in favor of approval of the consent agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you. The motion carries 5-0. Item 8, discussion items. We have one discussion item this evening, and that is to further advance the board's continuing discussion on proposed projects to be funded by remaining bond proceeds. To kind of summarize where we've been, and board members and Dr. Finch, please correct me if I've misrepresented or misstated anything. That's not my intent. But last fall, we had a couple of community forums to discuss a variety of different options about whether or not to defease the money back to the taxpayers, whether to spend all of the money that is all of the remaining bond proceeds, or spend some, or what projects would we do? And we took a variety of we took many comments from the public. And out of that, a couple of months ago, I believe, some board members wanted a few more or some more concrete bid numbers in terms of costs of various projects as we continue our deliberations. And so I think this would be maybe a good place to introduce Mr. Joe Conley to kind of pick up with the work that he's done since receiving that direction a couple of months ago.
Perfect. Thank you. Took a lot of words out of my mouth, so I'll just, you guys, you got the 2 memos in your board packet, and one of those memos is the capital projects list that I met with Mark and Dave and worked with Jack McCaskill, our facilities director, about defining what that list would look like. And then I worked with a couple contacts that I have, and then Jack worked with a couple contacts, and we're able to get some more accurate, up-to-date cost assessments. And that's what's listed in front of you here. I did add soft costs essentially already, but you never really know until you actually go out for the RFP and you go through the competitive bid process, what those actual numbers are going to be. But this should give you a good indication of where current market is telling us where cost is at. So other than that, that's what those numbers represent there, unless you have specific questions towards that.
Well, can
The
you also
other
take us
memo,
through- yeah,
go
take
ahead.
us through-
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
Go ahead and take us through the other memo and the
Yeah.
timeline.
The other memo is the one I think is more important right now because we need to put a timeline together about making a decision about what our next steps are. So I put this together. It's pretty, it goes through 6 different meetings. Essentially, today's meeting is number 1. And I know, as Michael Thorner alluded to, is that we want to have an additional community forum. So I think that's the start where you guys need to have a discussion today about what date we're going to have that, whether we're going to have that, or and move forward with that. And then obviously meeting number 2 would be to have that community forum, gather community feedback. And then number 3 meeting, which as you can see on here, I think is the most important because that's where the decision is made about whether to defease funds or defease all the funds or use partial of it for some projects, which is what that list is. And that's where you guys need to have a discussion about what projects you're going to choose to use, or if you're going to use the funds, which projects you're choosing to go forward with. And then meeting 4 is essentially the start of the resolution process, whether that's through defeasance or whether that's through a change in alterations of the use of bond funds in order to fund specific projects. So is there any questions on, I guess, the timeline as far as what I put together there?
And then go ahead and take us to meeting 5 and 6.
Meeting 5 is the public hearing, which is part of the resolution process. So we'll have a bond attorney work with us. They'll set that, and they'll set a public hearing in that. We'll have that second meeting. We'll allow community feedback as well regarding that resolution. And they'll be able to present information about their opinions to the board regarding how they feel about the use of that. And then meeting 6 is where the board adopts the resolution and the changes that were set forth.
Except for meeting 2, all of these will be school board scheduled meetings.
Yes,
Okay.
they are.
Thank you.
You don't have to necessarily have it on Tuesday. You can do it on a Monday if you like. So it doesn't necessarily have to be on a board meeting. The community forum can be done as a public meeting. So you can do that on Monday if you like. And then you can hold meeting 3 on Tuesday, even though I don't think it gives you enough time.
So just as we were looking at the calendar, if you were going to have the public forum or community forum, we're looking at Monday, March 20th. That would give us time to advertise it. And then the next week following that, so there'd be some time to consider the public comment. And then the following week would be a regular board meeting. So that might be a potential date would be that Monday, March 20th.
Yeah, I think once you set the community forum, it'll pretty much start to set what the schedule and calendar is going to look like for the additional meetings. So,
And where would we have the community forum?
well,
we were
I'm assuming
considering
the auditorium would
the
be
high
good-
school
a good
auditorium.
spot.
Yeah.
I think we've averaged about 40 to 50 people that have shown up to the previous forum. So
So being realistic here,
Yes, sir.
are we looking 3 to 4 months really to run through this entire process if we use the timeline for our board meetings
that
as a
is-
schedule?
that is correct. Okay. Just the resolution process is 3 different meetings in itself. So it's to present the resolution about setting the public hearing, then you have the public hearing, then you accept the resolution. And bond, I still have to reach out to bond counsel in order to set all that up, but I'm kind of waiting. Meeting 3, I think, is, like I said, the most important element here about setting what the future is going to hold.
Because in meeting 3, you would need direction from the school board as to what it desires in terms of a resolution.
That is correct.
I have some, if no one has questions about the meetings themselves, Mr. Connolly, I have
Yes,
some
sir.
questions about the actual project list and some of the costs, just some
Okay.
real basic questions. So
Yes, sir.
the single-use restrooms there, so We're looking at 2 in the high school, 1 in the junior high, and 1 at the middle school, if I understand what you have here correctly. So the 2 in the 2 in the high school, are we talking about conversions or are these new restrooms?
These are conversions.
These are
So we would
conversions.
choose one from upstairs and one downstairs.
Okay. And is there, and this cost here does not, I take it, include or consider the restroom banks outside of the gym area or the main foyer that the lunches are held?
We haven't decided on the room. This is based upon the square footage. So if we chose 2 restrooms, one upstairs, one downstairs, this is essentially what the cost would be. So it's based upon per square foot. So
I
we had
see.
an estimate through Design West is about $350 per square foot at the high school level. So I just took the highest ones just in case we chose those bathrooms to kind of give you what that number would look like if we chose the highest square footage restrooms in order to modify those.
So you haven't decided which bathrooms?
We have not completely decided. I think, like I said, I think meeting 3 will push me towards
Yeah.
starting to put some things together and working with some of our contractors and working with our facilities and working with architects on that.
Okay. And another question I have for you. So, and kind of an important one, the property acquisition line. So that really doesn't fit neatly into our health and safety sort of mantra we're using here, but it is a important consideration. How did you come up with that particular?
Actually, I just grabbed a couple parcels through our conversations based upon assessed valuation and kind of threw a number there. So the 2 large parcels that we've discussed, which is right across from the district office, I kind of just based it upon the assessed valuation. Obviously, there's a lot of rules that go along with school districts purchasing property. It has to be within what it's assessed, what the appraisal value is and so on and so forth. So not quite sure what people were asking for these specific parcels, but that's kind of what I used just to put a $2.8 million number in there.
Okay.
So there's definitely no science behind that by any means.
And then the other question I have regarding the high school, the field and the bleachers. So
Yes.
I can't remember. I've been to a few football games, but
Yeah.
I don't remember. So there's absolutely nothing there right now, correct? In
Yes.
terms of rails or handrails going up into the
No,
bleachers?
not on the bleachers. No.
Okay. And so this, when we say bleachers there, is that what we're referring to?
Yes,
Some
we'll
handrails?
make sure they're ADA compliant. So
Okay.
that's part of it. So it is a replacement of those current bleachers that stand there now.
Now, is that bleachers for multiple aisles or is that there's one main aisle there? And
I'll
that's
be
the rest-
honest. I'll be honest with you, Mark. I haven't really gone into much depth. We kind of gave them
Okay.
what our current system is, make it ADA compliant, and we would replace that there. So as far as getting into all the intricacies about what the project will hold, I haven't really got that because we just got
Okay.
some basic numbers there. So
So this number here, it doesn't really tell us how many we potentially could do a range.
I mean,
It's-
they gave us where our current bleachers are at. They said if we replace those with ADA compliance, this is what they would cost, and it's around $450,000-$500,000.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Is that both home side and visitor
That is
side?
home side only.
I had somebody catch me as far as ADA with the, we have 3 different landings, I think, at the high school.
Mhm.
One of them, which is handicapped wheelchair
Mhm.
accessible. And it's one at the far end with the kids, where the kids sit.
Okay.
And I spent with my son a half a game there one time.
Yeah.
And it was miserable.
Yeah.
Because of kids move. Our kids don't move now like they did 20 years ago. Our kids are really controlled better than they were 20 years ago at football games.
Yeah.
But they still move, and the kids jumping across his legs and stuff was, I didn't, nothing happened, but we left at halftime because it was very uncomfortable. I know it's pushing, but could we look at putting a ramp in the middle section where the adults sit also?
Of
We
course,
already
I
have
mean,
one. Can we have a second one?
of course, we can look at almost everything. Like I said, this is just to give us a cost estimate as it stands now. As you guys make a decision going forward, then we can start looking at some of those things. And then obviously I'll meet with you guys and then we can start discussing some of the wants and the needs as far as what we see from the bleachers specifically.
Okay, and the other, I talked to a track coach and he had seen this and he talked about how at Eisenhower, they have a beautiful track and it's locked up.
Yeah.
And the assumption is if we have a beautiful track
and football field, it's going to be locked up also. And we have a lot of parents and kids who right now use our football field track
Of course.
for exercise. And as an alternative, to look at putting like 4 lanes of rubberized track in at the junior high.
Mm-hmm.
So we have something for the parents and the kids to ride their bikes on and walk around. And so they don't lose that access to a facility.
Okay.
Because I don't think we would be very smart in not locking up our football field. We need to protect that. I mean, that's a lot of money to put into something.
We can definitely assess it as far as safety and security and those types of things, but I think
Yeah.
that's obviously a discussion.
But that would be something in addition here too.
Of course. Fencing is also included in the bleachers piece of it. There is some fencing that goes along with that because you're shifting some of the track out. And so I think that's part of it as well.
And you're also expanding to the point we can play soccer there, correct?
Correct. Yes, we have to meet all Title IX requirements. So, yep.
Which is great.
Yep.
Great.
They have to lock it up, would we?
No, I mean, that's a choice for,
Yeah.
I guess, yourself and
Right.
the board to make, and obviously work with our security and SOC team. So,
And just
Mr.
one
Conley,
last
should the board
question.
decide
Oh, go ahead.
to utilize some of the funds for part of this,
Mhm.
then unless I'm misheard or misunderstood, whatever, the board's responsibility at this time is for meeting 3, if you will, is to have some kind of a meeting, study session, whatever, and prioritize these expenditures.
yes. And so if you look at
So that you would know, and we could get some.
that would help me
more
going
firmer
forward. Yes.
Figures, yeah.
So if you look at the partial or no defeasance, you'll see that that's part of it. So discussion of the list, which projects to fund, which to pursue. And I think you guys would do that based upon your board majority vote. So, yep.
So just one more comment about the field. And does this include anything in terms of repairs or modification to the press box?
That is not part of this. So that's a separate piece that we would have another contractor kind of look at. So my guess is it'd be, I did have one estimate, but it's probably about $250,000 for that piece of it, the press box.
Okay.
So it just depends on which bleachers we choose. And I think that's what is a catalyst towards the next steps about the press box.
So I think my job as the chair is to try to gather some input as to the will of the majority of the board in terms of the direction, so that we can appropriately plan the meetings. This doesn't mean that this list is the final list. This doesn't mean that we're going to do these projects. It just means that that we need some direction by the majority of the board on what they would like to do. And I keep saying that because my job as the chair is separate and apart of my individual feelings about the use of these proceeds. So I want to make that really clear, again, without repeating myself, as I've stated in other meetings. So I'm seeking some direction from the majority of the board as to the next steps, what you'd like to see. We do, for instance, we don't just have to have one community forum. We can have more than one. But I did ask Mr. Conley to lay out the timeline in terms of the steps that need the order of operations and the steps that need to be taken. And again, to reiterate that tonight's meeting is not an action by the board, but rather direction about how do we move the ball down the field, so to speak.
Before we get to that stage, we've been to 2 community forums. We've heard from a lot of community. We've voiced our opinions. I have not heard anything official from the district. And to put Dr. Finch and Mr. Conley on the spot a little bit, can you give me the district's position and kind of the rationale behind what their recommendation would be?
Just like the board is, like Michael Thorner just said, he's one person and his thoughts. You know, I am one person with thoughts. Was looking and hearing the discussion from the community and just very concerned about long-range plans for the district, concerned about our recent operations levy passing at a pretty small margin and not wanting to lose any of those votes as we move forward. So if you're asking what I would do if I had a vote, I would vote to defease the funds and have a way to do a capital projects levy to do the items that are on this list that are highly needed for the district for safety and security. And capital projects levy can pass with a 50% majority of the vote. And so that would be my recommendation.
I'm going to be way more PC. I am not going to answer your question. What I'm going to tell you is that whatever the board decides, I'm going to move forward in the appropriate manner to make sure that we do the best job in that with the decision that you made. I will not make my opinion made. So
Thank you, Mr. Conley.
Of course.
Because in regards to Mr. Mokel's question, the first thought that ran across this old half vacant mind was that's the board's job and responsibility is to give you that information, not the administration. So thank you
No
for
problem.
your comment.
I'd like to weigh in just a little bit here. I think that what Mr. Conley drew up here, I think is a good footprint for us to just start the process with. I don't see any reason to vary from it. I think we should stay with the initial plan. We'll have another community forum, hear more. Because one of the things that I recall we discussed is that we wanted a better list of projects and a closer or as accurate as we can, a estimate of what these costs were to help us make a decision. So I think what he's laid out here gives us a good idea of the timeline. My only concern was how long it would take, but if we followed the 2-week process that we're doing now, we're looking at about 3 months, maybe a little bit longer. So it seems reasonable to take our time and do the right thing here. I kind of agree with Mr. Meyer here. Not to take away from the superintendent's thoughts here, but ultimately we're the ones who are going to have to make that decision. And I think, our process is a little different in the sense that financially, that's a big responsibility for us as a group to collectively make. And what we decide is where, he is going to lead us in terms of handling those things. So in the long run, my thought here is, I think we need to make that decision amongst ourselves.
I pose that question because as an educator myself, I find incredible value in the professionals that are in the buildings, whether it's the superintendent chair or down to our parapros that are working with kindergartners on reading. And so we heard from 100 plus 200 community members on what they would do with the funds. I have not heard publicly what the experts of our school district would do with the funds. That's why I pose the question. I hold Dr. Finch in high regard, and I respect his opinion. And I think that there's many people in the district that live in our district as community members, as students, as staff that also respect his opinions. And I thought they needed to be heard.
I think we've had 2 public meetings. We've had an article in the newspaper. We've had a district mailing that went out to everybody in the district. We're going to have a 3rd public meeting. There's no rule that says that if you're a teacher or a parapro, you can't come to those public meetings. They're more than welcome to come to those public meetings along with everybody else. And I wish they would and express their opinion. But the complaint that I have heard in the past was that we did things in shadows. When White Hollow was built, part of the money was spent at the high school. I mean, that's the big one. We have been in the open. We have not hid anything. I I think we have done everything we possibly can to inform the public about this information. And now we're not only informing them about the idea, but we're giving them hard numbers. And we're giving them exact things that we're going to do. I don't know how we can create a more open atmosphere in this situation than what we've done. And if the teachers and the parapros want to speak out, have them come to the public meetings or come to the school board meeting and speak out. We don't need to have a special meeting for the teachers and the parapros. They're all part of most of them are part of the West Valley community. They're patrons, they're taxpayers. They have the right, and they also have the responsibility that if they have an opinion, to share it with us. That's their decision.
So I would, again, I go back to your question, Mr. Thorner, was what kind of direction would we want to go? And I would stand by what Mr. Connolly has presented here to the board in terms of an appropriate timeline to, figure out what we're going to do here.
Can I ask the board members individually two clarifying questions about that direction? First, and I'm just going to lay them both out. First question is are you okay having for meeting 2, or should it be meeting 2 and 3? Should it be 1 community forum or 2? And then the second question is the list that Mr. Conley and Mr. McCaskill have developed for us with the projects and approximate costs based upon the estimates. Of course, they're all subject to going through the public bidding process. But in terms of the forms themselves, is the list of projects satisfactory for further consideration during those community forums?
So I'll jump in on the first one of the two. I think when we talked about this, the idea was just one last forum once we had some hard numbers to work with, or as hard as we can get them. And so I think that's about as close as we can come. The other factor in considering cost is time is of the essence, because with time, numbers change, costs change, they either increase and generally do. So I would go for the 1 community forum.
Okay.
In terms of your second point about the list itself, I feel that we started out with a sort of long laundry list, and this is kind of distilled down to what we feel are the most important health and safety and critical needs of the school district itself. And so I think it's a good list, but, I'm open. I'm just sharing my thoughts early on since, I'm at the point of just kind of speaking out here. But I think it looks good at this point. I'm kind of real happy with what you've put together, you and Mr. McCaskill. So
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Strong. I'm gonna look down to the other end, Mr. Meyer.
And I, like
Far
Mr.
right.
Strong, yeah, I'm his right-hand guy. I'm like Mr. Strong, I'm for 1 public forum. And I agree with, Mr. Caskill and Mr. Conley's work on compiling and condensing this list, if you will. And for what it's worth, my decision is going to be based on not only the health and safety of our students, but also our patrons and folks like myself that are getting up a little bit in age as far as some of the facilities we have. And I'll be looking to spend money on the health and safety issue of it. So not wanting to say too much, that's where I'm coming from.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Mokel.
I would say 1 meeting, and I do appreciate the work that you and Jack have done to put this together. I know it's a lot of work. So beyond that, I'm going to say 1 meeting.
Okay. Mr. Jager.
1 meeting, and I really appreciate the work you've done on this, and I'm surprised actually that like the track football field bleachers came in much lower than we had been talking about. And that's pretty hard numbers. Not everything, I know it's not guaranteed, but I'm pleased with the numbers I see here.
Good deal.
Okay, so so we've heard from the majority of the board, and we would like to move forward with having a community forum on, I guess, Monday, 20th in the high school auditorium. My only request, Mr. Conley, if I may, for the 20th is if ahead of that meeting, you could put some slides together, just explaining a little bit of where we've been and where we are now, and that after the community forum, that you take a little bit of time to explain meetings 3, 4, and 5 to our community, just so that everybody has the opportunity to understand the process that we've been on, the process that we are currently on, and that based upon the community forum, we will then be having some further deliberations to refine exactly the route that we are going to go in form of an ultimate resolution that's passed by the school
Perfect. I can do
board.
that. Yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much to the members of the board. Now we're on to item 9, public comment on the discussion items. So I don't think we have a sign-in sheet for that, but that's okay. We'll go ahead and open it up to public comment at this time on the discussion item that we just had. Oh, I'm sorry, Brad, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Kirby, and then Mr. Liebert can go next.
Don Kirby. Appreciate your comments, Dr. Finch. I really do. Your yes is yes and your no is no, and I appreciate that from my standpoint. A couple questions with regard to the list here. So district is currently bidding the well replacement with the emergency generator, right? Is that right? What pot of money is that going to come out of if this is off the defeasance?
It's coming out of our capital projects that we've done transfers.
Okay.
So we've already planned a lot of these projects. We're trying to put things together. So
Okay.
This is just a list of the
Okay.
health and safety pieces.
So, and the list at the community forum meeting on October 18th, I'm concluding that this was pared down to this.
That's correct.
This was, so these other items now are no longer valid.
No, they're not. They're still valid.
Okay.
We're just working on those as they go through. It's just
Okay.
pared it down to
So, and the last thing was discussion on the ESSER, as far as the ESSER funds being available to utilize on some of these projects. I still contend that those projects can be funded with ESSER funds on some of these items here. So I think I presented that to the board earlier, and I'm not sure if I need to comment further on that, but I'd like to know where in the mix is the ESSER funds for the availability of this. That's all I had.
Mr. Liebert, sorry, so I didn't mean to just volley right over you.
You know what? If that's the worst thing that's happened to me in a given day, I'm good. Good evening, everyone. It's been a while since I've been here. Nice to see you all. Tonight, I'm here on behalf of the WVEA. I'm the vice president there, and tonight was my night. We did have a question, concern / suggestion for the 1610 revision that you're considering about conflicts of interest. We like that it's designed to decrease those. That's always a good thing in public agencies. We do think, though, that the language focusing on an officer or director's spouse, we suggest that you consider changing it to family members. So that way that like it includes a more broad space instead of just someone's spouse. We feel that that would be necessary to avoid any possible appearance of impropriety. I don't think that happens, but we think it would be good to have that in there. We don't want to prevent any qualified person from getting a position with the districts just because they happen to be related to a director or an officer of the district. But we do think that those members should declare that conflict of interest and recuse themselves. So we did not consider a study session. So we think that that could be resolved later as well. But we do think that change should be made. So that's from the WVEA. Now, as a 7th grade B team baseball coach, I would like to express my deep consideration for the facilities department, as not only is second base getting fixed, which has made me very happy, but there are now bleachers out there. So we invite all of you to our season, probably not opener because it's a little cold still, but in April, May, come check out a game. Should be good. We have not lost a game in a while, so we're doing all right. And the last thing is my student Cody over there. Cody, wave. Hi, that's Cody. If you haven't met Cody yet, he is one of the my students at the Innovation Center, and he knows pretty much everything about any electronic device I've ever encountered. Today they were tearing apart a cell phone, and I got to see it. So I learned more about patents and manufacturing wiring today than I ever thought that I would. So good job. All right, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comments? Mr. Marinacci.
Thank you. A question I have is if the bids come in lower or higher than the 13 million, is the intent that this 13 million is less than the approximate 19 million that's less, then that will just all get defeased?
Well, I guess it would depend on, I don't know.
Anyway, if that's okay.
You don't have to answer, but you may if you
You can
like.
claim the fifth. We can talk about it later.
It's up to you.
Rephrase your question now.
So right now we have a total of 13.2. At last count, there's about 19.5 million. So we've come up with this number.
I think it just depends on what the board decides to do, whether they want to say it's a finite number that they would like to defease and what they would like to keep, and then we build projects within that. Then if the RFP comes in higher or lower, then obviously that's a discussion with the board to decide whether we're going to move forward with those projects or not.
And then, excellent. And then if it turns out it comes in lower, is there like a backup project that you could slip in? So just both ways is
Transparent.
I like that. I like that. Speaking of transparency, thank you for this summary. I think it would be good to take this list before the public meeting, put it on the website, and provide some additional color so we understand what's going on here. Like I've heard this terminology, health and safety. I think that's a useful terminology for the community to understand what is meant by that. I mean, I think part of it might be logical. Appreciate Mr. Meyer talking about all of us getting older and possibly slipping somewhere. However, how do each of these projects fit into that, if that's the focus, health and safety, to talk about that? And the property acquisition, the estimate 2.8 million, tonight was the first I was hearing about, across the way. So maybe a more color as to what that might be about. So before people come to the meeting, they're prepared and they're not just hearing about a lot of this stuff for the first time. At least it'll be a more constructive public meeting. So just more depth, more color about what's going on. I think that would be helpful. All righty, thank you.
And just for clarification, we have talked about that the resolution would set an amount for projects and a set amount for defeasance. That's what we had discussed previously. So we do the set amount for projects, then you work within that budget.
Any other public comments? I'll close the public comment period. On to action items, we have 8 travel requests that were presented to the board. Does anybody have any questions? Would we like to take them as a group?
I did want to make a clarification.
Thank you.
So there is this travel to the competency-based education conference it's outside of Denver. And just wanted to share, so both of those requests, there's one from the Innovation Center, one from the mid-level campus. Both the Innovation Center and the mid-level campus have received two separate grants, one for the mid-level campus, one for the Innovation Center from OSPI for their work to advance competency-based education. And so Richard Pryor, principal of the mid-level campus, took a team to this conference previously and said it was a very transformational experience for the members of the team. They've come back and been great leaders for this work here at our mid-level campus. And so he wanted to take another team to the conference coming up this summer. And then he had also shared with Russ Tooman how that was such a great transformational experience. So Russ is also wanting to take a team as well. Both of those trips fit within the budget of the grant, and the grant must be used to advance mastery-based learning. And so it's an appropriate expenditure of the grant funds, and it is not using any of our district funds. It's 100% the grant funds from OSPI. So
And,
just wanted to clarify that.
and Eric Kernut going to the same conference out of the same funds?
Yes, that's correct.
I move to approve the travel requests,
All 8 of them.
all 1 through 8.
Thank you. There's a motion. I'll call for a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The motion carries on the 8 travel requests, 5-0. Next up, we have approval of policy additions, revisions, second reading. There are 9 of them. We've received some comment on one of them. How would the board like to proceed?
If I can share again, with the conflicts of interest, there was some comment at the last board meeting, so I did check with our council. And the council reviewed the policy as written and said that it does follow the law, and that there were no additional clauses or sentences needed for that. We did hear comment this evening about looking to be more restrictive than the law. And actually, I believe like the comment that Mr. Liebrick said, that would be more restrictive than what the law just talked about spouses. And so just wanted to share that we did get, I did run this by legal counsel, and they said that the policy as written does follow the law and is what is sufficient for the district.
I have a suggestion for consideration before a motion is made. I would like to suggest that we maybe take a motion on 3510, 1220, 2411, 3230, 3421, 5004, and 2140 and 4311. We could take a motion, and then 1660. I would like to make a few comments before we either take action or not on 1660. That would be my suggestion.
I move to approve 3510, 1220, skip that one, 2411, 3230, 3421, 5004, 2140, and 4311.
Okay. Stephanie? You're good? Okay. So Mr. Jager approves, Mr. Jager moves for approval of the second reading of 8 of the policies that are before the board except for 1660. I'll call for a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries on the 8 second readings except 1660, 5-0. So 1660.
1610.
The thing that I would say just for myself and for the consideration of the board is that it doesn't matter if it's the conflicts of interest policy or any other policy of the school board. The school board and the school board members can bring forward at any time further revisions to the policy as they would like the board to consider. So in just my personal opinion, I don't see a problem adopting the second reading of 1660 as presented. That doesn't mean that I dismiss the comments that the board, that the board has received from members of the community. I think that, to Mr. Liebrick's point, for instance, as being somebody who writes for a living, what does or who does family members include? Is that immediate family members? Is that people that live in your house? Is that your stepchild? That's the problem with not being critical of the sentiment that's being brought forward. But my comment would be, where does that end? That's maybe a really good idea for us to do, but I think that's the type of thing that when our council is here to provide additional training for us, and we then, I know that for me, it will cause me to re-examine the policies. Perhaps there'll be further revisions to the policies that we want to make that go over and above the requirements of the law. So from my personal perspective, there's no harm in passing the second reading. And it's an ongoing discussion, as are all of our policies, provided that they are sound with the law, which is, of course, why we have legal counsel to advise us. So that's just my personal feeling on this. And anybody else that might say anything else is welcome to do so.
Yeah, well, I want to thank, Dr. Finch for his explanation, if you will. And I think, it's it's one of our duties is to stay within the law as it's written. And with Dr. Finch's explanation, 1610 does at this point. So I see no problem with moving to pass it for second reading at this point in time with what Mr. Thorner said still in mind. We have time and consideration to add additional things like Mr. Marinacci and Mr. Liebrick have brought to our attention.
I hate to do it, but I agree with Mr. Meyer.
And I just noticed that it might be a typo. It's 1660 up in the listing, and then down below in the hot links, it's 1610.
Yeah, 1610.
She did that just to confuse me and Mr. Thorner.
Anything else? I'd like to move to approve second reading of 1610. I'll call for a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0.
Mr. Thorner, I'm going to abstain from that
Okay.
vote, so.
Sorry, thank you. 4-0 on 1610.
All right, next we had a request for proposal, and we received this bid, and we need to take official action to approve the bid. This is for the filtering system that we use in our technology. Keep our students safe with our technology and the internet for the whole district, the district network that we have.
Would somebody like to make a motion to approve the RFP?
So moved.
Mr. Mokel, thank you. I'll call for a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The motion carries 5-0. Item 11, items arising. Hearing none, we'll move on to item 12, reports. Anything to add, Dr. Finch, or call out specifically?
No, nothing to add.
I note that we're still over 100 kids higher than our estimate, which if you read the papers, we're probably one of the few districts in the state that is above their anticipated count.
Mm-hmm. And as Mr. Conley was explaining to me the other day along those lines, now that we're into January and further, this is when the state apportions based upon our actual enrollment, which will be favorable to the school district. Item 13, superintendent's report.
Please provide in writing.
Thank you. Board report, item 14, board reports, board development.
I'd just like to mention one of the retirees, Greg Porter, started about when I started. And he spent 30 years at Atanum as a teacher at Atanum. And I'm sorry that I don't know a lot of these other people on there, but it touches me every time I see one of my old buddies retire. So, he did a heck of a job out there.
Thank you, Mr. Jager.
Our winter athletes at the high school just got done with their state tournaments and whatnot. Like to congratulate all the athletes. Boys basketball team were state academic champs this year, which being an educator, that's pretty important to me. So it was good to see. Also, this last weekend on Saturday was the father-daughter dance here at the high school. It was great to see the amount of dads that were in the building. I think I did see one mom that was with a daughter. My daughter and I, over the last several years, we have finished third in the contest, second in the contest. We were the defending champions coming in this last year. I went all out and wore a dress, and we took sixth. So it didn't pay off. But the gentleman that did win with his daughter, they came as Beauty and the Beast. And speaking with him, he's a single dad in our district, and he's got both a son and a daughter in the district. And he was just like that mom that came with her daughter. He came with a son to the mother-son dance. So congratulations to that family. That was pretty cool. And it was great to see all the dads there with their daughters. Everybody looked great.
Thank you. Any other reports? Okay, so item 15 is an executive session for the performance of a public employee. We will, let's call that 23 minutes, and we'll come back at 8:20, and no action will be taken following the executive session. Okay. It's 8:09. We are going to come out of executive session and take no action. And I adjourn the meeting at 8:09. Thank you.